Mr. Svenlin, why don't you press buttons while looking at the big screen in front of you to see what they do? It's called the scientific method, another thing you apparently skipped at the academy.
How do you say your name?
Why, Letterford, like the legendary lettuce elephant.
Oh my god,
Mr.
it's
Carnage.
Scotchbox. It's Scotchbox. It's a Scotchbox, motherfucker.
It is.
That is him. I know the voice
I
right
love
away.
your YouTube.
Oh my god, I praise you. Dear Lord, you are a captain. You are my fucking idol.
No,
I have no idea what you're talking about. I am just a humble Starfleet officer.
Trust me,
Yeah.
I'm addicted to his channel.
I know his channel. I know his voice.
You wait, he did no one's better than this guy. This guy's
do realize-
Do you have
dream.
any idea what they're talking about, Mr. Fenlon?
No, because that's obviously an AI voice. Tons of channels have AI voice.
Oh
Exactly.
my god, this is amazing. This is the reason I have the class. For this day. Scotchbox, I've been waiting for this day for a year.
What is a Scotch box? I don't understand,
my
Mr.
God.
Carnage.
This is so exciting. He's the reason I have this game. He's the only reason I have VR. This guy sells VR. He should be receiving a commission from this game every time one of these is sold.
Well, please tell Red
sorry.
Storm that.
I-
I assure you, this
I've
is my
met
real
you-
voice, Thurston Fenlan.
I've met U.S. presidents and I didn't get excited like I am right now.
Can we not do Enterprise because that it changes
We're gonna
the
do
controls
whatever
and-
this God wants us to
Whatever
do. Okay?
Scotch-
Whatever
Mr.
God
Fenlon.
wants us to do is what we're gonna do.
No, let's listen to Mr. Fenlon. If he doesn't want to go aboard this Enterprise, clearly he'd be more comfortable in cardboard hell, and maybe he'll think about what he wishes for next time.
Captain's log, Stardate 2258.295. Local authorities have requested our assistance in gathering data on several anomalies in the region. We're beginning our survey now.
Gentlemen, welcome aboard the USS Priapism. We are going to be having a little adventure together. Especially you, Mr.
Oh my
Fenlon,
God!
who will be sitting upon
What
my
is
knee.
going on with this?
I have
Mr.
no
Fenlon.
idea what's going on.
You have spent 4
Where's
years at
the ship?
Starfleet Academy learning how to use your jolly ranches. Don't you pretend you can't fly this ship.
The red ones are good.
I'm fine on the Aegis, please.
What's that, Mr. Fenlon? You preferred the Enterprise D, but that ship won't be built for another 110 years. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Mr. Fenlon, in your own sweet time, I want you to set a warp course to the Venov system. Good luck. You have 1 minute, starting now.
What is that?
Oh my God!
Perhaps you need some calming music to help you concentrate.
This is the greatest day of my life.
Oh my God.
How's that warp course going, Mr. Fenlon?
Okay, I think you're actually alright here now, and now...
You're gonna
How do I
be
use
famous,
this
Mr.
ship?
Can you please plot a warp course?
Yes, what that
Oh my God.
crazy Joe to the 8,686th power asked you. Look at the big screen in front of you while you press buttons. Try to avoid hitting objects outside the ship as you do so. Mr. Fenlon, I asked you to plot a warp course 2 minutes ago, and I can't help but notice that rather than that, my ship has already taken severe hull damage. Mr. Crazy Joe, give me a readout of ship's systems and hull integrity, while we made the terrible mistake of putting Mr. Fenlon in charge of driving it.
Warp core is at 45%, Captain.
Sorry, Mr. Joe, I didn't hear you. Whose fault did you say that was?
I said the warp core is at 45%.
Yes, but whose fault did you say it was, Mr. 8686?
Let me look around the room 1 second. Mr. Fenlon!
I think you might be right, Mr. 8686. Now, Mr. Fenlon, I'd like you, as I may have previously mentioned, to set a warp course to the Vinov system.
How do I even steer this ship?
Mr. Svenlin, why don't you press buttons while looking at the big screen in front of you to see what they do? It's called the scientific method, another thing you apparently skipped at the academy. Yes,
No,
why
I
not?
study
I
history.
quite like asteroid fields.
Beyond me.
However, when your obsession with rocks and the ability to hit them with other people's ships is over, perhaps you could plot a warp course to the Vinov system.
Just gonna randomly hit buttons and hope something.
Oh, that's not what you were doing before. Was there some reason to the helter-skelter bespeckling of jolly ranchers and midget gems you've been pitter-patting with your little hands? Because I've got to say, from here, it doesn't look like it. Mr. Fenlon, I tell you what, why don't we do something else? Why don't you set a warp course to the Vinov system?
I think I got some. Might be aligned. I hope.
Oh, well then, Mr. Fenlon, I put you in charge. You have the helm. If you'd like to go there, please
How do
ask
I-
Mr. Joe to charge the warp core. Does the cat have your tongue, Mr. Fenlon, or is it another thing you are incapable of operating?
It's another. Oh my god. At least they have a white dot above the thing I'm pressing.
Mr. Fenlon, I'm the one who should be crying. Hold yourself together and set a warp course for the Vinov system.
Maybe this yellow button will work.
Maybe.
Or maybe this orange button will do.
Mr. Joe, what do you think Mr. Fenlon should do?
He should ask me to charge the warp coils.
Okay.
Please charge the warp coils.
Captain, may I charge the warp coils?
Oh, very well. Let's do that for our valedictorian student here. I think he's earned it.
Charging the warp coils for the 5th time.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. Mr. Fenlon, what would you like to do now? Now that you are oh so
Engage
sure
warp, but
we
I
have
have
a
no
line.
idea how.
Why don't you press? Oh, well, you've pressed another thing. Never mind, Mr. Fenlon, you're on your own. Might I recommend turning hard to starboard, which is space talk for right, Mr. Fenlon. I appreciate you may have missed the first day of Starfleet Academy. Probably you were busy in sickbay, where they were pulling your thumb out of whichever orifice you had it stuck in.
I can assure you I have watched Next Generation and all that other stuff except for original series.
Well,
No,
phenomenal though that is, perhaps you should have been watching Their Hands. Take us port, Mr. Fenlon. That's space for left, Mr. Fenlon. Okay. Once again, while I appreciate the beautiful pitter-patter I'm now hearing, are you seeing any clues as you randomly spam things to my view screen?
No.
No?
I guess it was
I
not
saw quite a
smart.
lot. But I thought you were Sherlock Holmes, Mr. Fenlon. Legendary detective. Could it be that you are
We're gonna
not?
die because of my.
Oh, death would be too sweet, Mr. Fenlon. This is forever. Unless you set a warp course for the Vinov system.
We're still doing
Hey, we're aligned.
Excellent.
We're
Why don't you
doing
press
the warp
the go forwards
for the
buttons?
7th time.
The what button?
I'm going to give you a clue, Mr. Fenlon. Start tapping the top right, yellow and blue Jolly Ranchers. Tap them again. Give them both a good tickle there, Mr. Fenlon. Good work, Mr. Joe. Keep tickling them, Mr. Fenlon. No one said stop. If you feel it quivering, it means you're getting close. Good boy. Excellent work, everyone. I'm really enjoying spending our time in this new and interesting location. What do you think of it, Mr. Fenlon? Pretty, isn't it?
I don't know if it's worth what it took to get there.
Well, it's truly fascinating. You know, I haven't seen rock formations like this before. It was a nice sojourn. But now, Mr. Fenlon, I'd like you to set a warp course for the Vinov system.
Oh,
Yes. Just we're so royal screwed.
Captain, suggestion.
I don't know, just
What is your suggestion, Mr.
You could maybe try
8686?
Lieutenant Uhura over at helm.
wait.
Yes,
The
I think maybe you
navigation
should.
panel is changing. What a realization is this?
Maybe if you had a button that kind of locks in things. Mr. Fenlon, have you pressed a button you could have pressed 40 minutes ago? This is very exciting. Mr. Fenlon, I'm going to press the congratulations button. Well done. What do you think you should do now, before you break it?
I think I should set a
Mr.
course for
Fenlon. What do you think you should do, Mr. Fenlon? This is very exciting. I think we're getting through to him.
Set a course for the
Yes? Yes? So close. So close. Come on. Come on, it's like training a monkey. Come on. You're so close. Use your words.
Arna system.
So close, Mr. Fenlon. But no. Why don't you move that little orange circle around the big blue circle with Vinov written next to it?
Vina, that one.
Mr.
Oh,
Joe, why don't you charge the warp coils? You know, just for a laugh. Apparently, we're made of dilithium.
I'm loving pressing these buttons. They're fun. It's
Wait,
charging.
wait, it's doing something.
Well, that's good,
It might be
because
doing-
Lord knows you're not. Mr. Fenlon.
Captain,
Yes, Mr. Joe.
I'm getting a little hungry. You think we could get a snack?
Mr. Joe, in that skirt you are the snack. But I'm afraid right now, more important things are happening.
Yay!
Excellent work. Maybe you should press the select target or location button. Do you have a button for locking in what you're pointing at right now?
Maybe.
That's okay. We have so much antimatter that I'm sure we won't run out.
Yep, all the
Clearly
time in the
Mr.
world, I
Fenlon believes so.
Oh no!
Wait, we're not selecting the right system anymore.
This is similar to what I wanted you to do, but I was hoping you'd set a warp course to the Vinov system.
Ow!
Excellent. Now, having highlighted it, perhaps you could lock in the coordinates for that system, Mr. Fenlon.
So what
Or,
button do I press to do that?
If you believe that you are already locked in, you could align yourself on the boob to your right by moving the ship to the left with the button you have that turns the ship to port.
There's a button for this? Well, you could describe it from all the other buttons.
Mr. Fenlon, you're the one who went to the academy, where I'm sure they also taught you the button which brings up the menu that shows you what all other buttons do, that you could have pressed half an hour ago.
I found it!
Good boy, Mr. Fenlon. Now turn my ship to port! The next Cochrane field that collapses is coming out of your salary. Good, Mr. Fenlon. If you overshoot it, I will beat you to death. Mr. Fenlon, you seem to have overshot it.
Just a little.
I'm sorry,
Turn
but a
right,
captain must always honor his statements. Excellent work.
Okay.
Mr. Fenlon! All stop! All stop!
Finally do it?
Mr. Fenlon, turn to face your captain. Mr. Fenlon, I can't help but notice that for a moment there, I don't care about hostile vessels, Mr. Fenlon. It seems to me, from my meager viewpoint up here on this pedestal Starfleet saw fit to put me on, turn to face your captain, Mr. Fenlon! It seems as though you went to warp before your captain gave the order to engage. Would you like me to report that you went joyriding with a Constitution-class starship? It might be made out of cardboard and love, but my god, it's my cardboard and love, Mr. Fenlon. I'll take an I'm sorry, Captain now, Mr. Fenlon.
I'm sorry, Captain.
That's very good. Now then, shields up, Mr. Carnage. Protect my ship. What's left of it, if you haven't died of old age. Mr. Joe, balance power through to shields and weapons. Prepare shoot-an, Mr.
Roger,
Carnage. I'd like to scan the anomalies in this system. Perhaps Mr. Fenlon can drive us near them while you scan them, Mr. Carnage.
Yes.
Bias power
yes,
to shields, Mr. Joe.
Yes, Captain.
Now, Mr. Lan, there will come a time in the coming eons in which, perhaps in some state of emergency, I might request us go elsewhere. Do you think that in the fullness of time, were this to occur, you would find yourself able of carrying out my orders? Mr. Fenlon, did you even understand the sentence?
I'm trying to follow the ship.
Mr. Fenlon, the Enterprise-shaped bubble on that screen is this ship. You do not have to follow.
Go ship.
Mr. Fenlon,
talking about
why are you trying to follow the enemy? Are you an enemy? If they jumped off a bridge, would you? Lord knows, I hope so. But if you could please ride parallel to these anomalies while Mr. Carnage scans them. Bias power to engines, please, Mr. Joe. During this conversation, we've been brought down to 45% shields. I will make sure you are closest to the hull when it buckles.
Trust me. If we were on this ship, I would be a great navigation officer.
Oh really, Mr. Fenlon? Because here's the thing. We are on this ship, and you do not appear to be.
You're probably on it. Other than what this is supposed to be.
Yes, Mr. Fenlon. That's a Constitution-class starship. What is it, Mr. Joe?
Our shields are at 10%. I think if you could fly a little faster, it might help keep them up.
Mr. Carnage,
Could
how
you
go
put
those scans?
Navigation up on the screen.
We're on our just give
No,
me a
Mr.
final
Fenlon.
scan, Captain.
I cannot. Excellent. Get a cheeky scan on.
Just
You may also fire torpedoes at the enemy, though it will mean...
Feed him in.
Good, Mr. Fenlon. On my mark, fly away. Put your hand over the blue Jolly Rancher, top
Okay.
right. Engage. Mr. Fenlon,
All scanning done.
engage. Any moment now, Mr. Fenlon. Engage. Mr. Fenlon, I've had to press the big red scary button. Try the yellow button, Mr. Fenlon.
the warp coils.
Mr. Joe, could you charge the warp coils?
sir.
S'il vous plaît. Because I don't trust Mr. Fenlon to choose a different local system to choose. I think he can only hit things which are far away, and on average...
We're about to blow up, sir.
Mr.
And I
Fenlon,
can
engage. Good boy, Mr. Fenlon. It's a manner of speaking. Very good work, everyone. Asterisk. So, now, I'd like to... God help us! Warp to the Tyrus system. Do you know what a T looks like, Mr. Fenlon? While, Mr. Fenlon, I couldn't help but notice that while you're steering the ship, less than a second after you said the phrase, and I quote, "I got this," there was a loud prang of something hitting our hull. And while you're scurrying about in this menu, a large red blob is approaching us on the radar to your right. Mr. Fenlon, I can't help but notice in disgust, Mr. Carnage has dropped our shields to welcome death. That's how... Mr. Fenlon, look to your right. You see this man in a red shirt lying on the floor. Hang on. Captain to sickbay, one to beam directly. That man's death is on you.
I can't see him.
Yeah, you know why? I've had to get him sent, not to medical, but to the morgue. Now that you've set a course for Tyrus, perhaps you could charge the warp coils, Mr. Joe, and repair the ship that Mr. Fenlon has inevitably caused.
It's very damaged, Captain.
What a surprise! It's okay. I'm sure Mr. Fenlon has a lot of pocket money from his paper route they gave him because they felt sorry for him.
I don't know how I got on a Constitution-class ship, but Captain...
Mate,
they said
I don't think
was
you
ready
could
to
use the
serve.
bicycle. Mr. Fenlon! Mr. Fenlon, I want to hear 3 words from you. What are they?
They know we're here. Target closing on an attack vector.
I have no idea.
We have
Sir.
a incoming hail, Captain.
That's 5 words, Mr. Fenlon. I would like you to say, "I'm sorry, Captain," or if you're very sorry, "I'm sorry, Daddy." Good. Hard to port, ramming speed, Mr. Fenlon, and put your head out the hull. I want you to nut this Klingon warbird that's
We're in
chasing
the
us.
Tyrus system, right?
Congratulations. Now on the local map, heaven help us, Mr. Fenlon, I want you to set a course to the research station. Yes, the what indeed. Mr. Carnage, fire torpedoes behind us.
Aye, sir.
Hit the local map, my friend. Local, it may also be called Impulse.
Oh.
Good. Select the Tyrus system. Sorry, Tyrus II. You already have it highlighted, I believe.
Great.
Having
yes.
done so, a sub-sub menu will appear. While I'm explaining this to you, we literally have a warbird literally up our ass. Good boy. Good. Please, set a course for planetary orbit. Maybe bias power to shields, Mr. Joe. Because that would be something else.
There we go.
Here we go, said with such excitement, Mr. Lan, even though you are going to be suffering 12 simultaneous court-martials when we get in. Please, lock that course in.
I'm glad, Captain, you think we're
Maybe.
gonna get in. I'm glad to hear
Maybe
that.
one of your Jolly Ranchers is called Select or such.
There we go.
Torpedoes out, Mr. Carnage.
Aye, sir.
Align our vector, Mr. Lan. Yes, why not steer us towards the ship bristling with death cannons? Good idea! I can see why you left the Academy so early. Mr. Carnage, you successfully destroyed that ship. GG. Engage, Mr. Lan. If you overshoot it, you will get 2 beatings.
Should I now engage Impulse?
That's why I said it, Mr. Lan. Thank you. I am not accustomed to
Did I do
repeating
well?
myself. I've got a little button here that can answer that. You have one chance to redeem yourself, Mr. Fenlon. Mr. Joe, bias all power to engines. Mr. Fenlon,
Yes, Captain.
when you see a civilian ship in front of us, activate ramming speed. Don't let those civilian bastards escape alive.
What?
Full speed ahead.
Hear half of what you said.
Go forwards, Mr. Fenlon. The green thing in front of you. Mr. Fenlon, I have to say it's been an honor serving with you. It is unfortunate about the accident you're about to have.
Wait, you're sending me towards Rap.
Normally, when you send a widow or a ailing mother a lovely roast or ham, it's as an apology for the loss of their son. In your case, I'm sure it will be an adequate replacement. Mr. Fenlon, hard to port. Ramming speed on that space
It's a
station.
civilian.
It's a civilian space station, which will do. Hard to port, Mr. Fenlon. Which is space for left, Mr. Fenlon. I thought we'd been over this.
I'm afraid.
Mr.
sir,
Fenlon,
that-
I will put you off the ship or tickle you, whichever you like the least, unless you perform your duties.
I'm not going to kill civilians.
Could you please swing us back around, because you have done the space equivalent of missing the interset off-ramp. This should be impossible in an infinite volume, but you found a way.
Okay.
Good.
So kill us
Good.
all then.
Death is too good for you, Mr. Fenlon. But sadly, it's all you can afford.
Looks like they're standing by to receive our data. Transmitting now.
Oh, what a surprise! You hit something in the last second of the match. GG, in lowercase and exclusionary. A huge thank you to all the new patrons. It's very nice to have you on board. And thank you for watching to the sweet, sweet end. If you enjoyed this video, would you kindly hit the like button? That sort of action really helps small channels.
And I've got a little baby channel.